for many years now in sort of building this movement and rallying, shall we say, stakeholders towards impact investing. And today's session, there've been I think three. This may be the, Kate, you'll correct me if it's the third or
third.
It's the third. So today's session is corporate impact, and at Impact Alpha we've been we frankly started covering more private equity, where you come from as well, and venture capital and whatnot. But we have moved, as I think impact investing has moved, to recognition that corporate impact and public equities investing is a key element of the impact equation. And so what I'm looking for you today to help us understand how we can drive and how corporations can drive real social impact. I would say that they're not, that's not probably the popular perception of them so far, but maybe it will be in the future if everything goes according to your plans. So why don't you just give us the sort of, you know, sort of where you come into this conversation, and then we'll jump off, and I obviously have a lot of specific questions. Why don't you give us how you see the spectrum of corporate impact?
Wonderful. Thank you very much, David. Thank you, Kate. Wonderful to be here with Franz and Suzanne and Vivian to talk about this, because in a way, corporations are at the center of this revolution, but they are really the last entrant into it. What do I mean by that? Our system has become self-defeating. Why? Because companies, in their pursuit of profit, create all sorts of consequences, often unwittingly, environmental and social, and then governments tax us all to try to remedy them. But the scale, the dimension today of these consequences is so huge that no amount of taxing is going to deal with the climate issues and the lack of social diversity that exists. And so the question is, how do we get companies and investors to work together to improve lives and improve the planet instead of creating these problems? And a lot of the work I've been involved with, David, as you know, at Harvard Business School, has resulted in the publication just 2 or 3 weeks ago of the environmental impact created by 1,800 companies. And when you begin to see this impact measured and monetized, and you realize that of the 1,800 companies, 250 of them are creating more damage environmentally each year than they are profit, and that a full third of the companies are creating damage equivalent to 25% of their profit each year, you begin to understand how important this impact transparency is. And just to close off, as a background to the beginning of our conversation, the effort at Harvard is going to publish in the next few months the environmental impact and the impact on people from the products of companies and also from their employment. So we will have the ability to look at all the positive, negative impacts of companies and to judge their performance on impact alongside their performance on profit.
I want to dig deeply into that, and it gets a little wonky with how with what I think you call impact weighted accounts, and we'll get there. But let's actually keep it at a little bit higher level, and maybe I might deviate from our plan a little bit and bring the Suzanne and Franz in a little bit earlier, because I think that what we've been talking about is a kind of spectrum of corporate impact, and obviously people know about a kind of period of corporate social responsibility, corporate philanthropy, and those are obviously super important. I think what you're trying to get at with impact weighted accounts is really the full operational impact of a company's products, its services, its employment, its supply chain. It's a much deeper level of digging into what corporate impact might be. We've been at Impact Alpha been looking as well. There's your effort. There's a few other efforts, and we found effectively similar results to what you have, which is that if you take into account full social environmental costs, and frankly, you have to take into account full social environmental benefits as well. So there's positive externalities, negative externalities, but you tote that all up. It's not a pretty picture for most corporations. Now, the ones that do the best, generally speaking, are the digital and modern innovative companies, and we're lucky to have Salesforce and PayPal both here. Don't tend to do a lot of extractive mining. Don't tend to have supply chains with human rights abuses and that sort of thing in digital platforms. But maybe Suzanne, we'll start with you. Just how do you assess where Salesforce is on this journey? I know Mark Benioff obviously been an outspoken champion of stakeholder capitalism and whatnot, but where do you assess, Salesforce's corporate impact? Just to, I don't know, Ronnie, whether you actually assess Salesforce, but if they had, Suzanne, how would Salesforce do on a total accounting basis?
Yeah, thanks, David, for the question. And I really applaud the effort. I think that transparency is critical to accountability. And, there's countries in Europe that are way ahead of where we are from a regulatory perspective, especially around environmental impacts. So I really applaud the effort. I really applaud the investment community in this country. I think they've driven further faster than almost any industry on holding companies like Salesforce and others accountable. So just a lot of gratitude. And I'll just start by saying, Salesforce I've been around for 20 years. I was one of the original members of the company. I started when we were about 50 people. We're now close to 50,000. And, we started the company with a different thesis from the very beginning, saying that, you have to look out for your community as you build the business from the very early days. So I was hired, very early on to sort of stand up a foundation for a tech startup in 2000, really kind of unheard of. Actually learned a lot from the earlier companies like eBay and Levi's and others who had been sort of at this longer. And so, we started the company with that founding principle. We called it at the time a 1-1-1 model, which was, putting our products, our people, and our resources to work in the world. And if I now fast forward 2 decades, what I'll say is, where we report, to your question, is on something we call the Stakeholder Impact Report, which actually looks at all areas of our business, from governance to diversity to environment to philanthropy to jobs. Every year we set goals and we hold ourselves accountable to those goals. Because we're a tech company, like you mentioned, we don't have a dirty supply chain. We're not an extractive industry. We do use a lot of power from data centers. We are moving to the public cloud. So I'm really glad to see Amazon and others beginning to sort of take that more seriously. It has such ripple impact on the industry. And because our superpower is technology, we've been trying to figure out how do we use that to improve the state of the world. So we stood up an impact investment fund. We're the second largest corporate venture capitalist in the country. And my thesis a couple of years ago was, what if we took some of those venture funds and intentionally pointed it towards entrepreneurs working in climate and education and workforce development. And we're now seeing a real groundswell of other companies that are sending up impact funds. I'm really, really thrilled about that. And I talk to them at least one a week. But the second example I'll just use, and then I'll stop, is, our superpower as a technology company is a platform, like you mentioned. So as we were thinking about transparency and measurement, we built a system for ourselves because we couldn't find one in the market. We actually built it in partnership with Ernst & Young. It's a new product we just set up in January called Sustainability Cloud. And our reporting, gathering all this energy data, went from about 6 months to about 6 weeks. in our ability to gather this data and report against it. It's auditable, it's investor grade data, and we packaged it and we're now kind of giving it out to the world for our customers, for any company who has net zero goals. So, we keep trying to think, what can we bring to the table that's unique and that we know something about, and that can make a difference. So we look across the company at every operational level, marketing, you name it, events, strategy, sort of sustainability from events, our HR process. We just published a sustainability at home guide this past week. So you can take every part of our business, and we really try to enable those business owners to drive the impact. And then, my team is sort of supportive of that.
That's terrific. Thank you, Suzanne, because that's one of these patterns that we see, which is you do something internally, companies do something internally, and then they find that actually has value externally and turn it into a product or a service. And then obviously that exponentially increases the impact of that innovation. And as you say, so there's a lot of points that Salesforce ticks on this journey, from obviously foundation, as you said, and CSR, but then corporate venture, and then now products and services that help other companies sort of enhance their own sustainability. Franz, do you want to just jump into, I know you have at PayPal made a very large commitment recently on racial justice issues, and that it may be a jumping off point, but also just how do you, again, to the point, if you assessed PayPal's total positive negative impact, are you net positive or net negative?
Well, I like Suzanne's framing around how do you think about your superpowers and how do you contribute those to the world. And I think we've looked really hard at our core capabilities and how they connect to our mission and our values, and how we can deploy ourselves as a company to make a positive difference in the communities we're serving and in society. And we do this in a framework of what I think is commonly now called stakeholder capitalism, in thinking about our stakeholders and how we can contribute sort of our core capabilities to advance the interests of all of our stakeholders. We start with maybe I'll use the pandemic and the outbreak of the pandemic as an example of how you can bring this to bear, and how we, like every other company, had to figure it out on the fly, but the framework that we applied may help to give an example of how we approach this. So we understood that we had to serve the full array of our stakeholders when the pandemic hit. We always start with our employees, and that we prioritize our employees as our top stakeholder. We focus on their health and safety. We focus on their financial well-being, their financial security, and we focused on our employees first and made sure everybody was safe. Then we knew that there were things we could do for our customers, that because we're, like, as with Salesforce, we're a platform, we're a payments platform. There we have PayPal working capital products, we have consumer products, we have merchant products. We went to our second group of stakeholders and said, how can we help? And we provided different forms of relief and different forms of assistance. Lots of companies did this as well. We also, a key stakeholder for PayPal, we're a regulated company. We are involved in financial services. We offered our help to governments and to regulators. And an example of that was with the PPP program and the US government, and how could money flow to actual small businesses and not only to the large customers of major financial institutions, but how do you actually, and so we took on the payment, working with the Small Business Administration and with the Treasury Department, how could we help on the PPP program? And also, how could we get stimulus checks into people's digital wallets, because nobody wanted cash. And so we had a role to play to contribute our core capabilities into that process. We also have the world's largest donation platform. So we also went out and we mobilized campaigns in many, many countries and helped the nonprofit sector to really get up on its feet. March was a very tough year for many nonprofits because everything kind of stopped, but then it came back enormously. And so you need really strong donation platforms, and billions of dollars were given to COVID relief programs and relief organizations through PayPal digitally, starting in March and running through till today. And this approach, really extended into each of the communities where our employees, our customers, and nonprofits and the government was operating. So we felt like we had a role to play, and that extended into, the pandemic created inordinate pressures on Black-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses. And we also really understood that we needed to address that part of our community that was the most vulnerable and was facing the most challenges, both as a result of the pandemic and what clearly was clear to everyone was systemic economic inequality and racial injustice that had created an enormous wealth gap. So we focused on, again, serving each part of that community with a program that was a commitment of $530 million that focused on immediate relief in the form of cash grants, medium-term relief in the form of partnerships with nonprofits, and long-term efforts to close the racial wealth gap through investing in Black-owned venture funds and minority-owned venture funds and putting our capital into Black-owned community financial institutions that could deploy that money in the Black community. And we also invested in our own company's programs, again, making sure that wherever we walk the walk, we walk the talk internally and externally, and create that seamlessness that you referred to early on about employees first. So that's I stretched out the sequence, but that's an example of how at least we've tried to take this stakeholder capitalism approach as we face new societal challenges and think about what's the distinctive role PayPal can play. And I should say that many companies have stepped up, and Salesforce has been extraordinary. And for years, Salesforce has really been a model that companies have looked to in thinking about social impact and how to make these kinds of commitments in major ways. So I haven't met Suzanne before, but I take this opportunity to salute her work.
Glad we could make that connection here today. So now that's a good setup where I was going to begin, but I think this actually works well. Vivian, you're with us now? Yes.
Hi. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm still having technical issues.
No worries. We're sorry. We're sorry we can't see you, but we're delighted to have you. And you are you are the CEO of a social enterprise called Laudato Tree, and I was particularly excited to have you as the father of a now incoming high school student. I'm very eager to have models of. I think, are you still in high school?
Yes, I am. I'm a junior.
Oh, you're a junior, so he's a freshman. But by the time he's a junior, perhaps he'll be a social entrepreneur as well. So anyway,
oh.
But what I wanted to do and have you kind of lay down the challenge, both not just for an older generation, to be honest, but also for the corporate sector. Maybe you can tell a little bit of what Laudato Tree is trying to do, but what I want you to focus it on is what do you need, what do we all need from companies to step up to meet the big challenges of our time. So it's on you to rally a great call to action here. So
yeah, of course. So basically, what Laudato Tree is, it's a youth-led movement to plant 7 million trees along the Great Green Wall in Africa. The Great Green Wall is an initiative that is planting a 5,000-mile wall, air quotes there, wall of trees that at its completion will be the largest living structure on Earth. Laudato Tree isn't just about planting trees, it's about empowering communities. It's sort of an investment in our future. And I think the call to action would be, we need a better climate. There are so many things going wrong with climate change and with the health of our planet. I would say my call to action is just to try to make the climate as best as we can, just to sort of create a solution that will make our future certain again.
Great. So let's pose the challenge to both Sir Ronald and to Suzanne and Franz. and it doesn't have to be things you are doing. I really am sort of enlisting you as kind of, you know, a design process here, a workshop as it were. Take on something as big as a great green wall across Africa to remediate or mitigate and adapt to climate change. You could take on, you know, any other major challenge and initiative, if as it were. Maybe there's a racial justice initiative, for example, but something really big, something really society changing, world changing, that really tackles the challenges at the scale at which they, and the urgency at which we need. And just what, Ronnie, let's start with you. What can corporations do to not just be sort of net neutral, but actually massively net positive?
So I think that's the business model of the future, David. That's what entrepreneurs are busy designing business models to achieve. And if you take Elon Musk's Tesla, here is a very good example of it. Building a company that can be worth a lot of money, but that actually improves the world by shifting the automobile industry away from the combustion engine. And Tesla has actually achieved that, you know, which is amazing. Now there are thousands of ventures across the world now, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands maybe, with a specific problem to solve. That's the difference with traditional entrepreneurship. When traditional entrepreneurship was just about making money, an entrepreneur would look for a market opportunity and balance risk and return. But the new model is to balance risk, return, and impact, to find an opportunity that enables you, the more impact you deliver, to make the more money. And I want to give an example here of what these future impact companies are going to look like, because they will disrupt the existing models of many companies, just as technology did. And we have here PayPal and Salesforce, which are leaders in showing how companies can assume philanthropic roles. And it may be that there are some, and of course, manage themselves so as to achieve social goals. But their business models may be difficult to turn into business models that achieve real impact through their day-to-day business activity. And in those cases, it's perfectly fine to add a philanthropic model of some kind, as PayPal have been doing, $530 million, a massive amount of money. I've never heard of a company taking its responsibilities so seriously before. And so the issue today is, if you think of a young entrepreneur going out to build the Microsoft of the future or the Apple of the future, that entrepreneur will be thinking in terms not just of building a venture that can become worth $1 billion, as both PayPal and Salesforce achieved from scratch, but can also improve the lives of 1 billion people. And I want just to bring this to life, to give an example which appears in the book of a company called Orcam here in Israel, from which I speak, set up by some great artificial intelligence entrepreneurs to help the blind to see. What does that mean? A pair of spectacles that the wearer can put on and hear the book that they're holding in their hand read to them, or the newspaper or the banknote in their, in their hand. Now, there are 35 million blind people in the world and 250 million visually impaired people. So you set up a company with the aim of helping the visually impaired and the blind. You have a market of 300 million people, and you have a business model that enables you to raise the last round at the $600 million valuation and raise $100 million so far. But if you want to think like a Steve Jobs or a Bill Gates when they started out, you ask the question, how can my technology improve the lives of the maximum number of people in the planet? And you get a surprising answer because you're looking at the world through a different lens. You'd never ask that question in traditional risk-return thinking. But when you're thinking risk-return impact and you ask that question, you get a surprising answer. The answer is, what if we gave these spectacles to the 800 million illiterate adults in the world? What would that do for their lives and livelihoods, or for their economies, or even the world economy? And I think those are the ventures of the future. Ventures that become huge companies that are solving problems instead of creating problems in the wake of their pursuit of profit. Solving problems, and at the same time becoming extremely, extremely valuable. So I'd like to make a distinction, David, between a business that does good, manages itself well, and it's interesting because when we talk in terms of tech, we look at the social impact of employment practices in the tech industry. It's not a great story. So we've done an exercise as part of the Harvard Business School impact weighted accounts effort, which is open source. You can all go to see it. We're analyzing employment impact, and we're going to be publishing a paper very soon. And we're going to be looking at a few hundred companies and comparing them. Now, take Intel. Intel is a great company. It's gone out of its way to push the well-being of its workforce and improve diversity. But if you compare the diversity around Intel facilities with the diversity within the company, and if you look at disparities in gender pay and the benefits and so on and so forth, then it reduces the potential employment impact of a $7 billion wage bill for US employees by half to $3.5 billion because of lack of diversity and lack of equality of benefits. Now, it's all very well to talk in terms of doing good, but Frans, you talked about walking the walk, and I think we have to walk the walk. If we want to solve the climate issue, we can't just talk at government level about solving the climate issue. The climate issue is created by companies, not by governments. We have to get companies to change their behavior, and it's not so tough to do. Because we're seeing investment money now, as we were saying earlier, flow to the companies that are solving problems, or at the very least, minimizing their pollution and the social issues they create. And that reduces their value on the stock market. So it's using markets and the profit motive, but balancing it with an impact motive. And I think that's going to change the world of companies. It's going to move the goalposts for businesses. They're going to have to perform not just at making money, but also at making impact. Because if they don't, investors are going to desert them, talent is going to desert them, and consumers are going to desert them. So there's a much bigger change here than just an acceptance of a greater philanthropic role or better employment practices. There is a new deal coming after COVID-19, just as if we had a new deal after the 1929 crash. And it involves bringing companies and investors together to bring us solutions to the problems we face instead of creating problems.
Great. Suzanne and Frans, again, not to go over what we've gone over, but just to the thought of how do you take the next step to really not just, right size and optimize your own operation, but actually have this massive positive impact.
Well, okay, I could jump in. I think that, and Sir Ronnie, I think you're exactly right that to get at these big social challenges, we need sort of innovation and social impact at scale. But I would again go back to the point that Suzanne and I were talking about, that there are companies, major companies, that have a particular role to play where they can be both have extraordinary social impact and also fulfill the expectations of their investors. And you can see it in one dimension, maybe with a company like Unilever that's in a whole nother area than for us. We've been focusing on the global issue of democratizing financial services and focusing on the financial health of vulnerable communities. There are people all over the world who aren't yet connected to the global economy. So PayPal has a distinctive, PayPal and other fintech companies, certainly not us alone, but we have a distinctive ability to focus on that big, big question. How do we connect as many people as possible to the benefits of financial technology, affordable financial services, safe and secure, online digital wallets? You know, everybody has a smartphone increasingly, and in places where they don't have smartphones, they're becoming more and more inexpensive. And if you have a smartphone, you should be able to connect to the global economy to be able to perform and receive the benefits of basic financial services that have really been, you know, in the purview of the privileged and haven't been extended. And the ironic truth is that the less money you have, the more you spend on financial services. And that's one of those absurd upside down realities that we can solve we can solve with technology and software and willpower and the willingness to affect change at scale. So part of our call to action in our ecosystem is around this question of what I would say going beyond financial inclusion to financial participation and to financial health. And that, I think, is one way that we can go at it. We can't solve every issue, but we know we have a role to play in doing that. And so that's maybe one of those big rocks that we're aiming at that we think of will have enormous positive benefit, but also generate more economic value. And it goes back to also, we have the benefit that that's what we do best. And we're a platform company that's open. So we can work with partners all over the world. Like, again, I find myself evoking some of the phrases that Suzanne raised. So I'll hand back to you.
I want to go to you, Suzanne, but I just want to emphasize that point, Franz, which is that the business of moving billions of folks from inclusion to participation to financial health, as you say, is a big business. It's not just a side business. It sort of is the business.
It is the business, right?
So right. I just want that people to take
and
away
I
that
guess
point.
I'd also note, because of that, from the very beginning, we did not create a foundation at PayPal. We invested our social impact money into products and into partnerships with nonprofits, into ways of engaging our employees on this kind of a mission, because we wanted to put it at the core of the company, because we understood that with our mission and our capabilities, we could actually really wrap together profit and purpose in a way that would benefit all of our stakeholders, just to bring it back to the stakeholder capitalism approach, as I try to do.
Great. Suzanne, you can take this where you like. Again, it's big corporate impact, beyond where folks are now. So the next stage for Salesforce.
Yeah, I think I would just underline what I think Franz and Sarani said around core to the company, core and big. So the way Franz said it is, they never started a foundation, and they're moving to financial wellness. I mean, you can hear the sort of bold goals in there, and I think for us, and maybe why we have a good reputation in this space, is just like PayPal and Sarani's pointing to, we never made this an add-on to our company. We made it core. So every department in the company sets their own social and financial and environmental goals. So if I think about finance, one of the things we were working the long range plan for the company the other day, and we're looking at our renewable projects that are coming online. And one thing I love about that is it's actually a cost saving measure for the company over time. So finance is really incentivized to hit that goal because it gets to their larger goal as a team. Same with marketing. I didn't, say, I kind of said to the head of marketing, what should our social environmental goals be for the year? And she said, well, why don't we make all of our events carbon free? Why don't we plant a tree for every customer that shows up at an executive roundtable? And we just sort of let people be brilliant and let it be owned in that part of the organization. And I could go around every single part of the company and sort of give examples. And you know, HR, right? One of the things they came to me the other day said, you know, I want to be thinking about different ESG funds that we can be promoting to employees as investment vehicles as part of our benefit strategy, and spinning up some webinars. Why don't we also work with some of our customers to see if we can get discounts on solar, so that people that are working from home can, you know, get more off the grid. So we've just created this culture where it's not about me or a small team. It's about leaders all over the company in all departments that are really empowered to make change. And the final thing that I'll say is, because I actually believe like the human nature wants to do this. It's like it's a natural part of human nature is to want to improve the state of the world. So if you get runway to do that at work, you get rewarded for doing that at work, I just think it's a real incentive. And especially in times like this, like that. So one of our women in tech and products, she really busy. She's got a kid with a disability at home. She's, you know, like everybody else, locked up. She's now a, you know, school teacher and an executive and you name it. And she put all this pro bono time in the last 6 months to build something called a tree tracker, which is how we, you know, we set a bold goal around, Salesforce is going to put 100 million, grow, restore, or conserve 100 million trees in a decade. We have no idea how we're going to do that, actually.
Vivian might have some ideas for you.
Yes, and but we know, just like Richard Branson said with Virgin Airlines, you know, if you set a big goal, you will get there. And the bigger goal you set, and the closer you get to it, the better off than setting a smaller goal and attaining it. So what she did with her time in the pandemic is build us a whole system where we can actually track these trees, whether they come through carbon offsets or events or new hires. Every new hire that starts to the company, HR said, why don't we plant a couple trees in their name? And so everybody is rallying together. And she, with 30 other people, built this incredible tree tracker that now we can give to PayPal. It could be trees at paypal.com or trees at walmart.com. We're going to white label it, right? Because it's something we needed that we're going to share. But I say that story because when she just presented it to the all hands call the other day, and we were talking about this big goal, she said, you know, I have so much going on in my life and it's been rough and hard for everybody, but this actually gave me joy.
Yeah.
This actually gave me an opportunity to make, like, I was moving the needle on something. And in so many other places in my life, I feel like I'm just spinning. Yeah. And so anyway, I think being a community advocate, it's a great antidepressant. It's a great way to stay focused. And it's a great way to just do something that matters. So
great.
I'd also add, it's a great way to attract great talent, and that adds incredible value to the company and serves the investors. Great talent comes to mission-driven companies.
Well, great. So I wanted to go to questions, and in fact, Henry Harvey asked something similar to a question that I wanted to ask, and I want to put it to you, Ronnie. And I said we'd come back to impact weighted accounts, and Henry's question is about how do you account for the true cost. I don't want to get into the technicalities of that. I want to jump ahead and say, let's say you and your team of experts, and I know George Serafim and the team at Harvard is rock solid. Let's say we can account and we actually know the positive and negative, and we actually have a number that's similar, as you said, so we really can put impact up with risk and return. How can that drive the corporation? Is that going to drive executive compensation? Is that going to drive the stock price? Is that going to drive packages that you offer, as Franz said, to employees? They wanted a salary and benefits package, or they want an impact package. How does the mechanism actually work to take those impact weighted accounts and make it real?
So the mechanism works because investors basically set the tune. If investors are looking for companies that have the vision, like Salesforce and PayPal, of a world where companies take on solving certain problems and behave in a way that brings solutions to issues like diversity, unequal pay, gender inequality, and so on. If investors go for these companies because they believe that these companies are likely to attract talent, to have more loyal consumers, more loyal investors, and at the end of the day, avoid the risk of greater taxation and regulation that would come with impact transparency. Their value is going to fall, and the executive compensation, which is often linked to the share price, is going to decline. And so those companies are either going to be left behind, like IBM was when Microsoft and Apple overtook it, or they're going to get on and change their models. So you're beginning to see some of the traditional firms. So let's take an example in the fossil fuel industry, which I mentioned in the book. If you know, which you can see in the Harvard data, that ExxonMobil delivers $39 billion, forgive me, of environmental damage a year from its operations alone, not from the oil itself. And you know that Shell delivers 13 billion of environmental damage, and BP 8, and they're of similar size. What you're going to do as an investor, you'd have to be perverse to say, I'm going to invest in ExxonMobil because they're the biggest polluter, because you know that they run the risk of getting taxed and the risk of getting regulated. Now, when you get impact transparency, what's going to happen, David? Governments are going to look at the companies that are polluting the most or creating the most social issues and going to tax them directly instead of taxing us all for the damage, to cover the damage created by some companies. So already you see the investment community. David Swenson of Yale writes to the CEOs of all his portfolio companies and says, I want you to measure your environmental impact because it runs the risk of reducing your profitability in the future. So the mechanism of the market and the valuation is what's going to drive companies forward on this path. And it changes the rules of the game for companies. They then begin to compete on the basis of profit and of impact, because investors are going to look at price earnings ratios and valuation of companies relative to their impact weighted profits. They're going to create the analyses of whether the highest impact companies, which are also very profitable, are going to be more profitable than low impact companies in the future. And so you're going to find the mechanism of the market is the one that's pushing companies to perform on this basis.
Okay, Kate, I think you've been monitoring the questions. Do you want to queue a couple up?
Sure, I do. And we've had a couple interesting. There's quite a bit about employee level. There's part about how do we address this and what can regular folks do at a community level. And then we've got an interesting question from someone with the Teamsters. So let's really quickly just dovetail off of what we were just talking about. And Sherry Oberg is asking, so will nonprofits that find impactful solutions at scale become M&A targets for companies wanting to quickly improve their net impact, which is really interesting, much like what has happened. We've seen it, right, with tech companies who have very quickly purchased their innovations, not our two current people, of course. What say you, Ronnie?
Well, I'll just take my perspective on this. Friends might have a different one. From an M&A perspective, that's not where my company's head is at, right? So when we think about M&A targets, we think about growth areas, innovation for the company, generally around products and services. It doesn't mean it's not, have we looked at other nonprofit sort of product technology companies to acquire over time? Maybe a few over the last number of decades. I think, at least from where I sit as it relates to the nonprofit sector, we're more about partnership than we are about acquisition. How can we enable NGOs to scale? So if I think of like the World Resource Institute, we were able to work with them to build a super cool technology platform that's sort of monitoring different forestry projects all over the world. So I'll come back to like how can we put the wind in the sails of sort of amazing organizations? I think acquiring them is not a great strategy. They often get kind of eaten up in a big corporate machine. So, you know, for a long time, Salesforce Foundation, the .org team that I ran, was a separate legal entity. We were a reseller. We were not part of the company. We were able to grow fast. We didn't have to sit in these hour-long budget meetings, negotiating limited resources and where they go. So I just think the M&A idea is interesting, and maybe for some companies would be a fit. For us, the partnership model enables scale and autonomy so much faster.
Let me jump in on that,
Yeah,
Kate. Sorry, Franz, if I could, just because there's this is a sort of hot news topic around what are called SPACs, which are special purpose acquisition companies floated as IPOs and raise money on the public markets, and then go out, as you said, Kate, to go acquire actual companies. Mm-hmm. And there's starting to be a number of impact SPACs. And Ronnie, I know Bridges is involved with one, and it's floated one, I guess, is now out looking for the companies. There was an announcement this morning that a company called App Harvest, which runs a large high-tech greenhouse in the middle of Kentucky, in the middle of coal country, providing jobs as well as, you know, fresh lettuce and tomatoes, was acquired by a SPAC. So it's seen as a way to get public market capital into what had previously been private equity type companies. Ronnie, is that a trend of our time, or a scandal waiting to happen, or what's your take?
No, I actually do think that there are some companies delivering impact, but not in a methodical way, not measuring it and so on, but their product delivers impact. I mean, I think it's very interesting to hear Franz's view of how you can use financial services to reduce, the cost of people's finance, or to give them the ability to raise finance. I actually would like to come back and chat about that, because I think the banking industry is ripe for disruption today. You look at the fact that people are paying huge charges for overdraft. I agree with Franz. The people who are in constant overdraft are the poorest people, not the richest people, and they're paying the most. And it doesn't make sense, actually, from a risk point of view, even for the banks. But it happens to be where the banks are able to, because the borrower has no choice, to charge the highest price. So I think the concept of a SPAC, which is seeking to achieve both profit and impact, and acquire a company in the financial services or in the food area or in construction area or any other area where you can deliver a real impact, and boosting the impact that is delivered is a sound concept. I think the philanthropic world is also going through a revolution. What impact investing started out to do was to bring money to charitable organizations, to non-profits. Investment money, though, instead of donations. That's what the social impact bond, the pay for success bond, sought to do and is doing. And it's going to scale very significantly now. So if a company tried to acquire a non-for-profit, as it were, to provide services to a community, it might find it very difficult to do even through a profit with purpose model. I think providing services where you need the help of the community is best done through a philanthropic model rather than a for-profit model. On the other hand, when you get into products and you want growth and you want to be able to help the maximum number of people through the use of the extensive use of this product, then the for-profit model is a better one. So I think what's going to happen now is that we're going to see disruptive business models come in. So we've seen them with clean energy, and when you look at the trends for fossil fuel investments and clean energy investments, that that's how they've gone, as we all know, and it was predictable. But you had to believe that the technology was going to come for clean energy to begin to expand. So I think we really are shifting now to a new paradigm of risk return impact, and each of us in our business has the ability to work out, in my unique way, can I deliver my impact through my product? The answer may be yes or no. Hopefully it's always yes to some degree. Through my employment, right? By my employment practices and to the diversity, equality, and so on and so forth, or through my operations, the logistics of my company. And if we all begin to think in these terms, we will find that the companies that best balance risk, return, and impact, that optimize it in the most efficient way, are the ones that make the most money as well. I firmly believe that. That's the shift in paradigm, that risk, return, impact optimization delivers better financial results than just risk, return optimization.
Great.
I'll add in. I think that if you're a company that has a very defined mission, you can come at this with a lot of tools. So in our case, we have, if you look at our acquisition history, the first big acquisition of becoming independent was Zoom, and Zoom disrupted the remittances marketplace and basically cut in half the cost of sending money to families in other parts of the world, from the US and from Western Europe to all over the world. It used to be the model was kiosks and waiting online and sending wires, and Zoom enabled it through a handheld phone and brought the cost almost down to where the UN has recommended as a sustainability goal the cost of remittances should be. It's a hugely impactful service, but fits our business model perfectly. We also have acquired a company called iZettle, which provides amazing services to small businesses so that they can survive in an economy dominated by big businesses. Or Honey, which provides all kinds of discounts for people who are really trying to figure out how to buy via discount. But we also invest in some social, I would say, we take investments in companies like Acorns, which provides small amounts of investment for the everyday user, where you just are topping up or putting pennies in every day. Or a company like Tala we've invested in, which is providing loans to individuals and small businesses that don't have credit history. And then there are nonprofit partnerships. We have a huge partnership with Kiva to help support micro lending, where we enable all of the payments, and it's hundreds of millions of dollars of small micro loans, and we're kind of help them with the backbone of the payments. And we also have a long partnership with Village Capital, which gets right at this question. Village Capital helps to find community-based entrepreneurs that are trying to solve social impact problems, and then helps them build forward so that they're ready to take investment and to enable them to seek venture capital. And we partner with them to help strengthen and build those community entrepreneurs, social impact entrepreneurs, and get them ready for that next stage. So there's a wide spectrum of tools that if you're intentional about the mission and about how you can sort of keep bringing to bear your focus, all of those things I just mentioned go towards improving financial health and towards connecting small businesses and families and individuals to affordable financial services and to access to capital and credit. But it has to be a very mindful process across the full dimension of the company, which goes back to Suzanne's point about employees. If your employees understand the mission across functions and business units and regions, these kinds of opportunities and engagement is possible. But it's all about that unified view of the strength of the mission.
So I'm going to jump in with 2 more questions. Thank you so much for that, Franz.
Can we go a couple minutes over for Kate?
Yes, I was going to tell everyone, I'm thinking we'll probably go about 5 to 7 minutes over, if that's all right. This is such a juicy conversation. So, and I could talk about this all day long. So Mike Dolan asked early out the gate, stipulated, employees first. Can the panelists imagine a role for organized labor in terms of A, healthy and safety, health and safety achieved through collective bargaining, B, corporate investor leverage through our multi-employment pension funds, and or as political allies to achieve progressive policy outcomes that advance our shared agenda for stakeholder capitalism, perhaps in their own companies. I bet I'd love to hear, Ronnie, what do you think? And I think this is also, I'm going to encourage everyone to come to, on October 13th, we're going to be talking a lot with government and the role that they can play in policy. So this would be another opportunity to answer that question.
Yeah,
But Ronnie, what do you think?
organized labor, I think, often is the sort of litmus test in some way of this stakeholder capitalism. So I'd love to hear from Ronnie as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it seems to me that if we have transparency on the level of pay relative to the top quartile in the sector, and if we look at gender parity in remuneration and advancement of people, whatever their backgrounds within a company, and we measure all of these things, it will be a way for organized labor to show that its ability to represent workers in discussions with the management of companies does result in better, not just better working conditions and all that, but better social outcomes. And I think organized labor has had a challenge in this looking like a win-lose situation always. Negotiation with government, we're taking it away from the company to give it to the workers. The reality is organized labor is there to improve the lives of workers. And to the extent that you improve the lives of workers, then you solve issues that we're all struggling with today. Issues of economic and social inequality that erupt in violence, that erupted in violence before COVID, and that are going to erupt in violence, even greater violence after COVID, because COVID is going to exacerbate the inequalities even more. So I think organized labor should really be supporting this transparency.
So impact weighted accounts for labor unions as well as for corporations.
I think impact weighted accounts will become a way for the management of companies to have proper discussions about impact performance, and labor unions are about delivering social improvement. And that's what the whole purpose of this is, well, that and environmental improvement.
I wanted to just come back to Vivian because we had her lay out a kind of call to action and charge at the beginning, and I don't know whether we've satisfied that call to action or not, Vivian, but it strikes me that one of the pushbacks against this whole notion of corporate impact is that, you know, the world is still in tough shape, and in particular climate is in very tough shape. So I don't know whether you have some thoughts, Vivian, just on what and you're on mute, so take yourself off mute, but whether you have some thoughts on whether this has opened up some avenues where you could maybe work with companies to help them amplify their impact, and obviously to amplify your impact as well.
I have heard some amazing things said today. I was sitting here just in awe, like listening to everybody's great ideas, all these smart people. I think that we're at one of the most critical moments in history where we could go one of two ways, either like have everything get better or everything get way worse. And I think we have to just put all of our differences aside and just work together and not make excuses, because we've had time to talk, we've had time to say we're going to do something, and now's the time for action. I really feel like that a lot of good is going to come from all this. I'm really honored to be listening to all these great ideas. So yeah, I really do think that amazing things are going to happen.
Wonderful. Well, I want to I want to thank everyone, because I know we've got Franz, TikTok goes the clock, a couple of folks have to drop, so I want to be sensitive to everyone's busy efforts towards making the world a better place. Thank the Lord for all of you. I do also want to point out, Kelly Wadsworth was asking, what can regular people do? Well, that's one of the reasons why we actually wanted to include Vivian in this. When she was 8, she started a lemonade stand that she raised $400,000 towards putting to go against human trafficking. I think seriously, in this book, there are numerous examples of what everyday people are doing. To Franz and also Suzanne, there are different ways that you can get involved. There are different financial vehicles like community notes that take $20 or $20 or $10. You can pay attention to where you're banking, right? And making sure there's so many easy, simple, low-hanging fruit. All of us are change makers. Each one of us can make a difference. And then you'll be ending up getting much more inspired by others. And it's amazing, I think, really what we can do together. So I just want to say thank you so much to everyone on this panel.
Thank you
Ronnie,
so much.
Viv, honestly, I can't wait to see all that you do. You're just getting started. And I can't wait to see the movement that you bring about. Suzanne,
Thank you.
my pleasure. Thank you for all your pioneering efforts and the amazing work that you're doing across many aspects of Salesforce. Franz, hello. I can't wait to see what you do with regarding to the democratization of financial wellness, which I think is beautifully put. All these systems are broken. I know that this group is going to fix it. So Ronnie, as always, you are amazing and you've done such great work, and you continue to urge all of us to continue to do that work ourselves. David, master of amplification. You are a partner and a friend, and I just so enjoy having everybody bring all of this to life. So I do want to let everybody know we have part 4 and part 5. Next Tuesday, we'll be looking at what the role of philanthropy is. And then the last but not least is government. That'll happen on the 13th with a big crescendo conversation at SOCAP, which is coming up, which will begin October 19th through the 23rd. Socialcapitalmarkets.net is where you can find out how to join there. Again, I'm Kate Byrne, KBYRNE at socapglobal.com. Happy to answer any questions. And with that, have an amazing, amazing week. And
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Thank
Thanks,
you all.
everybody. Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.